It's the Lapsed Fan Wrestling Podcast with Jack Encarnacao and JP Sarro.
It's still real to me, damn it!
The Lapsed Fan.
In all my years in professional wrestling, I've never seen anything like it. Oh my God! Drop kick and a beauty.
Well, it's the Lapsed Fan, man, number one in the ring. Forget about Cesaro, we the real king of swing. When the bell goes ding, you can kick like Ming. Thrown in the corner, make it splash like Sting. Even Jerry King will take off the crown, nodding his head like he's D-Lo Brown. We just get low down, but we go even higher. Flip you on your head, but you no cool driver. We be spitting more knowledge, the dragon spits fire. Leave you more shocked than when Edge retires. Dropping more truth than Recon and Sniper. Bless you with a coconut, Roddy Piper. Jack and JP be like JYD. Dropping cupcakes and quoting the brain Bobby. The best podcast from start to close. Now if y'all benefit, here's a 5-second pose.
Consider the loop closed. We had a funky idea, boss, where we would just take the transcript of Vince McMahon's 1994 federal steroid distribution trial and just read the motherfucker into the record, if you will.
Indeed.
We put that out in the atmosphere, and here we are.
Reestablished the record.
You could say that. Creatively interpreted the record, you might say.
Indeed.
And perhaps the ultimate reinterpretation here tonight as Darkside of the Ring caps its third season with a finale on the steroid trials. And as listeners of the podcast know, definitely a collaborative effort with that cast and the trial of his life, helping bring this to fruition. And we're here to kind of celebrate, but at the same time, really assess the significance of what we just saw. Jerry McDevitt, Phil Mushnick, Rezi Meltzer.
It was nice to finally put a face to Phil Mushnick.
Just your take. Let's start just right off the top, boss. What hit you the most? What struck you the most?
What struck me the most? Jerry McDevitt. He struck me many times. Just boom, 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 boom.
Why? He's so mild-mannered and calm and quiet.
Just the first thing that he says right there. You have no idea what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to crush you like a bug. That's it. I step back. I say, you know what, sir? You have control of my life. I'm over. I'm done. That's it. You guide me, sir. Tell me where to go.
We hope you can help guide us as we try to, pick up all the nuances. And we've got a great panel, so to speak, to help do that here on this special TLF presentation. But we want your help as well. What stood out to you, particularly those out in the TLF solar system who listened to the trial of his life day by day by day and really, are best positioned to pick up, nuances, things that might be underappreciated that came out during the course of the show. I certainly know I have my thoughts, but really want to hear yours as well. The phone number, if you want to join us, this is wide open to anybody to call in and talk with us tonight, is 917-832-8255. Yes, that is an Eastern District area code. 917-832-8255. And we need to welcome in our esteemed guests. First up, he's back, the co-creator of Darkside of the Ring and a co-conspirator, pardon the pun, in putting this episode together, one Evan Husney. Evan, man, you're sitting back. Season 3's done. You must be kicking your feet up.
I am, boys. I really am. 30 episodes of the show. Can you believe that? We've done 30 episodes of this show. So tonight marks the 30th. It's all done. But thanks for having me, guys. And especially thank you guys so much for all the help and guidance for this finale episode. Couldn't have done it without you. Seriously, I mean that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the trial of his life had a lot of guidance in its own right. Listeners of the series will remember our next guest, our returning champion, if you will. He is attorney Josh Kellerman, who was pivotal in helping us sort of understand and attempt a layman's explanation of some of the finer legal nuances and arguments that so permeated that dense trial transcript from 1994. Josh is back here tonight joining us. Josh, it's great to have you. And as the legal mind in the room, please, I turn it over to you. What stood out, knowing the story as you do, riding the wave as you did with us on this Dark Side of the Ring treatment of this subject matter?
Thanks, guys. It's nice to be back. It definitely was an interesting experience seeing this presented in a different form. And one of the first things that really hit me was just like the swagger that Jerry still has, as old as he is now.
Yeah.
A very good trial attorney has to get in there and get into trial psychosis, but it seems that Jerry is able to always be in trial psychosis, believing that he's always going to win no matter what he does. He can be playing tiddlywinks with you, and he's sure he's going to crush you like a buck.
Yeah. So in your experience, that's a comportment you're not used to from an attorney. That's kind of like an unusual swagger that you see. He doesn't even move in his chair, but man, to JP's point, does he communicate something about his essence?
No, I think that's so. Very good trial attorneys have to have that. You either have to have that, or you have to have like some sort of belief in the justice of one's cause. I don't think that Jerry actually believes that justice exists, which is one of the two ways that a trial attorney can be good. But it's either you have some sort of absolute belief that there is this justice thing that needs to happen here for whatever cause you're doing, or you just need to believe that when you go in there and you put your briefcase down, that there is no one in the world that can beat you.
Sure thing. And Evan,
could it be like he in a weird way channels Charles Foster Kane, justice on his terms?
Mm-hmm. Nice
That's
reference.
possible. On one level, all of us in there are not mercenary is not the right word. But whatever verdict the jury returns is what justice actually is. The hidden part of it is that you can move a jury a whole bunch if you're really good.
So Evan, when you came into the subject matter, I know we've talked about this even on the show. It's something that, it's an intimidating subject matter to get into. So take us from kind of your initial conception of this whole saga and where you stand today, having aired the episode on it, and kind of like what may have surprised you, what, now that it's over, kind of the takeaway from trying to get into a subject matter like this is.
Yeah, well, I remember in the very beginning of the show when we were working on season 1, developing it and figuring out what the show was going to be. We looked at all of the biggest stories in wrestling. We wanted to have a show that would be kind of your sweeping HBO-like series covering all the biggest, stories in wrestling. And the steroid trials was always one of those stories that was talked about for that, And we tried real hard to make it in season 1, and everyone turned us down. Nobody wanted to talk to us. Nobody knew who we were. We had no street cred whatsoever. So we didn't get anywhere. I think actually, I take that back. We had nails. That was all we had. So, and maybe we could have made,
That's all you need.
I know. Maybe we could have made an hour just with nails. That would have been cool. As long as I could have pitch shifted the voice and had that and the whole thing. But anyway, it just didn't work out. So we kind of abandoned it, and that kind of stuck around even through season 2. We were just like, this is unmakeable, really, as a show. And then once we got around to like, oh shit, we got to make 14 more of these, somehow for season 3. It was like, well, can we give it another try? And we just started reaching out to people, got some no's, got some yeses, got some maybes. Nail said no on the comeback. But
You say
but
no,
it was
or
really
did
like,
he say no?
Yeah, no.
All right, got it.
But we had to build it around somebody. We had to find a big, we had to get a big somebody that we could shape the episode around, somebody that would be the main character, for lack of a better term. And it was kind of this wild idea of like, what about Jerry McDivitt? And it was like, just because of, it's not like a hard, fast rule that WWE folks, can't talk to us. It's just you kind of presume, after being turned down so many times that that's going to be a thing. So it just seemed like a wild idea and something that was impossible. But I was like, all right, well, we don't have, the prosecution turned us down. Sean O'Shea turned us down for an interview. George Zahorian turned us down for an interview. So we're like, okay, we got to figure out if we're going to do this, maybe it's Jerry. So I just cold called his office and spoke to his assistant and or his secretary or somebody and she took my name and phone number, and he called me right back, and we had a long chat about other episodes of the show, and he had watched them and had some things to say about some of them, but But it was good. It was all good. I kind of heard him out from where his position was, and then my whole thing was like, look, this case is is arguably your biggest victory. It's one of the biggest moments in your career. And I think it would just be awesome to be able to tell this story really from your perspective and kind of build a show around you. And because I think, even as a wrestling fan growing up for so long, you hear the name Jerry McDevitt. And this is before listening to your show. Then I really got to know who Jerry McDevitt is. But before I had no concept, really. It's just a name you kind of heard on the side and things. And so I just thought it'd be interesting for fans to really see him on camera and to get his side of the story. And I think it would be interesting for us too, because, a lot of the viewers of our show, it's like they kind of look at our show as being very, very critical of WWE. And most of the times we're just telling the stories as they are. Right. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to kind of show a story where the WWE is victorious, and this is kind of really from their perspective. And I think it'd be really cool for us to really have somebody from the other side of the fence, if you will, to kind of tell a story from the WWE, from the company's perspective. So I thought that was really interesting. And and then once we were able to get Jerry on board, I think it kind of all fit in place. And then it was kind of peppering in some of the newsletter writers who were there covering the trial at the time, which I thought was, it doesn't come across in the episode now as much as it used to in previous edits, but just the idea of like, here's these, newsletter writers who kind of really became the de facto journalists that were covering this day by day. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, like the kind of wrestling fanzines having to kind of become the definitive press covering this, because it really wasn't covered that much on a day-to-day basis, especially when the OJ trial kicked in. But so anyway, it was just like, for me, it was like something I never thought we would do. I never thought we could pull it together, and to sort of see it come together, but then the daunting task of boiling it down into an hour and trying to make it all make sense and not make it alienating, because it's a lot of legalese and a lot of like lawyer drama. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like, I'm just so glad we were actually able to do it. And also, Jack, I keep saying, but thank you so much for your help on this, being a consultant on the show, like, your expertise, and you guys have all gone so deep on this subject. And it was like, if we didn't engage the lapsed fan on this show, our show would just be like, it just would be inauthentic, and people would be like, oh, just listen to the lapsed fan, like they always do with every goddamn show we do. So I figure, can't beat them, let's join them.
That sounds about right. Boss, you had all these mental pictures, right, when we're reading the trial of who these people are. Did any of it get shifted or adjusted watching tonight's documentary? No. Sean O'Shea's a coward
and a loser, and McDevitt's the bulldog. He just this predator, just an animal waiting to attack and devour his prey.
Okay. Josh, anything different than you expected to sort of encounter here, seeing these characters in the flesh, speaking?
Did I'm going to ask Evan, did O'Shea not even respond, or did he just say, fuck it, fuck you guys, I don't want to talk over this shit?
I think it was just, and this is just off memory, it's not an exact science here, but I do remember that he has kind of a hard and fast rule about not commenting on cases in which he didn't win, and I think it was kind of that sort of, from my recollection, it was that kind of a stock sort of answer to it. George Zahorian was just a there was no response whatsoever. Comments were left unanswered, as they say.
Yeah.
What do you think, Josh? Yeah, go ahead.
And how much was left on the cutting room floor of Jerry's interview? Because I could just watch that entire thing probably from front to back.
A lot. We actually interviewed him twice. Probably between both interviews, there's probably about 5 hours, maybe, I would say.
Can you just like release that?
Yeah, we're going to do the Jerry McDevitt DVD box set. It's going to be coming out next year, or Christmas time. It was
Errol Morris is going to produce it, right?
Yeah, right.
That's right.
The DVD box set. No, yeah, it would be great. No, I mean, Jerry doing the interview was great. I mean, I knew it was going to be, because we don't really know. I mean, sometimes when we do these episodes, especially if it's like an episode like profiling a specific wrestler, you kind of know the major beats of the story. Like their career highlights or the major turning points in their life. This story is so much bigger in a lot of ways sometimes, because there's so many little details and twists and turns and characters and side quests, and so so for us it was like we just had to get all of it, from him, and then kind of see how we could whittle it down into what it would ultimately become. So a lot of ground was covered, and like I said, 2 interviews worth of it, because we knew it just it'd be too exhausting to do it all in one go. Excuse me.
Oh, no problem. So, Josh, what would you say on the Sean O'Shea piece? Like my thought is always like, if he sees this, maybe he's compelled to speak about this part of his career. But maybe I'm just fundamentally misunderstanding, how much an assistant U.S. attorney would care. You know what I mean?
So, Evan, let me clarify on something that Evan said. That you said that Sean seems to have a policy of not talking about cases he's lost. Were you?
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
That he's talked about cases that he's won extensively, like post career.
I hate to say it, but just based on my memory, I'm not sure. I know that when we reached out to him in season 1, he turned us down, and I believe we tried again this season. And I'm pretty sure it was just a decline to be interviewed. But I heard somewhere, was it from you guys, that was kind of his kind of stance overall. I don't think he might have. I'm second guessing it. I don't know if he explained that specifically, but that's something I'd heard, is that was kind of his stance on talking about cases. If it was something that he didn't, if it wasn't a case in which he won.
Yeah, that was my supposition. Yeah.
There's a few ways that could be seen. One, just sore loser. Yeah. 2, all right, I was a prosecutor. The jury came back with a verdict of not guilty. It's not appropriate for me to talk about why I think the person was guilty. 3, some prosecutors are, that then leave for private practice, whatever, really do think that was my time in government service. I said all I needed to say when I was a prosecutor or in front of the court, and it's just not my place to talk. So there's a variety of different things that could be going on there, and I don't think I have enough information really to beyond that. I don't know how much was O'Shea involved in this case from the jump versus was he assigned later in this case when it turned into a dog?
Yeah, there was something that Jack, you and I talked about. I think about, like, if you speak about a case in which you didn't win, not about being a sore loser, but it's kind of about dragging the that same person through it again or something. Remember, didn't we talk about that?
Yeah.
That was my second
how did you
point.
put that?
That's exactly what Josh said. It's almost like, the jury found him not guilty, and here I am saying what a bunch of idiots the jury was. You very rarely going to hear that from a prosecutor. I don't think defense would hesitate, but in that case, I want to talk, Josh, about, and JP and everybody, of course, about Jim Stewart here. Okay, this is the limo driver. And whenever we talk about this case, boss, you remember this.
I didn't realize that. Wow, I didn't realize that Jimmy Stewart moonlighted as a limo driver. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't make the trial because he got goddamn post at the bottom of the stairs. But here he is, right? And
I was with Mary and everybody else.
He was dead at the time. He never existed.
Bedford Near Falls is more like it. But in terms of him being the limo driver that supposedly, or at least you can infer, because McDivitt does talk in the documentary about a driver moving these steroids from point A to point B, be it Titan Towers to Nassau Coliseum, Madison Square Garden, what have you. That being a key part of what Emily Feinberg was up there to say was that when stuff had to get to talent like Hulk Hogan, Stewart was the conduit. Yet, and Stewart is in the press before the trial. His lawyer is at least saying, yes, this is exactly what I did. Who knows what point of leverage that kind of publicity may have presented or afforded him. But we get, Josh, from Jerry, an explanation as to why Jim Stewart, the guy who could establish distribution if nobody else, right? The guy who drove the stuff around, allegedly, at least that was the fact pattern the prosecution was seeking to establish, had, according to Jerry McDivitt here, perjured himself when Jerry McDivitt had taken his deposition in a prior unrelated case that he sort of had a fuzzy memory about as to what that whole thing was about, which was interesting. But what about the significance of that? Because we spent a lot of time on the trial of his life, as you know, Josh, talking about where was the limo driver in all this? Why didn't he testify?
Right. And I'm sure in one of the 5 million things I speculated as far as like why he doesn't testify is there's some, there's some really bad fact I don't want to come out. And now we know what that bad fact is, that it sounds like Jerry actually got him to literally admit that prior sworn testimony that he had made in another part of these proceedings was a lie. I think we had talked during some of the sessions about like, well, why didn't they go after, some of these guys that testified for perjury? And we talked about how hard that was to establish. But the only way that you can really establish perjury is, having the guy admit that he committed perjury. It sounds like he got that out of him. And at that point, this is already a trial full of people who lie for a living.
That's right.
Way or the other.
Yes.
And now you're having someone who is supposed to be the central person that connects all these additional deliveries that really makes Nassau and this particular district in New York the appropriate venue. He drops off the face of the earth because once you get that particular part in, as far as someone who's admitted to being a liar under oath, then it's much easier to then build off of that into the larger narrative about how these other guys all lie for a living as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting kind of thread to tease out there. It just struck me as very significant. When I look at the totality of this, boss, it's almost like you got Stewart, you've got Feinberg, you've got Zahorian, who's out there saying, perhaps under duress, we'll get to that, but or at least that's what Jerry McDivitt kind of wants you to think. That yes, I did have a conversation with Vince where he did not tell me to stop giving roids to his talent. And that gets extinguished by that letter that McDivitt holds up.
Don't stop giving roids to my talent, my ability, and my talent, not to the performers. To me,
so it was just a misunderstanding of what was meant by talent.
Yes.
All right, that happens a lot over there. So when it comes to these like things you think about, what about Stewart? Bang, check mark, trump card. McDivitt's got him perjured. Zahorian says there was a meeting. Bang, look at this letter. It was under duress. He just like, you know what I mean? It's like a shooting gallery. He knocks him down.
Yeah, I don't think he it's not even a shooting gallery. I feel like this guy's just already he has knocked you down before you even fucking stood up.
Yeah,
he's gotten to you. He's gonna fucking take you out.
And maybe that's so, but remember, I had forgotten about this till I watched the episode, how he said that he didn't even have that letter until after his direct testimony.
Yes.
Case. And that's one of those things where you go to trial, you think you know everything, but that you also have to be ready to ride the wave. There's always something else that comes out that completely changes something. And as far as forced testimony, I mean, one of the places he spent his time was that same New York Federal Detention Center that allowed Epstein to die.
That's right.
That place is awful.
Oh.
Yeah, Evan, it's the same place that Epstein killed himself, right, Josh?
Where Epstein died.
Got it. That's much better.
We got a lawyer on the line.
I suppose.
It's so... how about that piece of it, Josh? How did that hit you? Because we talked about, this idea that some pressure may have been exerted on Emily Feinberg via Marty Bergman ahead of the trial. That was broached, I think, very well in the documentary. We had, this allegation that Zahorian may have, been getting some rather, they're sort of like direct signals. If you hear McDivitt's characterization of them, that he might be easier on him if he thinks a little harder about conversations he may have had with Vince. But on the piece about, this idea of witness tampering, that's a loaded thing to say. And McDivitt comes right out in the documentary tonight and says, if they had any evidence of witness tampering, we would have heard about it. There would have been charges. It would have been a big thing, and nothing of the sort happened.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
So when he denies witness tampering, and when Vince denies on TV witness tampering, notice what they're not denying. They are not denying that her husband talked to this person.
Right.
They're not denying that she told this person that was supposed to get her a book deal everything that she remembered and her reasons behind it and why.
We also didn't deny witness threatening.
Well, that witness tampering, witness threatening are basically the same thing, Vince.
No, not at all. We didn't tamper with anything. We may
Right,
have
so there's
threatened, but that is neither here nor there. We still won, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to let you get me in again.
Yeah, I was going to say, Vince, don't let me start cross-examining you again.
No, that would
so
not be
so
good.
what they deny is that they deny the term of art of and in crime of witness tampering. They deny that they changed her testimony or attempted to change what she would volitionally say under oath on questioning. They do not deny that they received through fraud the intimate details of her own thought process and what she planned on testifying to as her truth. They don't deny that.
You know, when I think through that thing, it's to me like all they really wanted out of that whole thing with Marty. Maybe it's all they got as opposed to all they wanted. Because when you read Emily Feinberg's testimony, it's clear in terms of the questions Bravetti asks her, they just wanted to be able to say that you thought you were going to get a book deal out of this thing, didn't you? And that's kind of the way to get that done, is to have Bergman sit down and kind of like almost establish that Feinberg is willing to talk turkey around saying what she knows, right? And Bravetti can confidently stride up to the cross-examination in the knowledge that Feinberg told her husband, not knowing it was her husband, that yes, I'm working on a book deal, this, that, and the other. Because that's really the extent of it on the stand. It's not like there's a whole lot of there seems to be a whole lot that Bravetti knows kind of beyond that isn't just apparent from the physical evidence that they obtained in discovery.
That's not what Meltzer seems to think.
Yeah, it's true. It's not what he seems to think. You're right about that.
And there's a difference between, again, the cold transcript and whatever it is that you all inject as far as embodying these characters as best.
Of course.
And then what was actually seen. I mean, Dave's a pretty shrewd guy, and he seemed to pick up on what was there. And one of the things he takes away from this is that, every turn in and out between these two, and a lot of times between two women in a courtroom, there's this, people can perceive the whole catty relationship sort of thing or all that, whether rightly or wrong, that's just humans. And once you're in there in a trial, you have to embrace that. She, in Meltzer's view, destroyed her in a way that seemed odd that she knew how to do that so easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It makes me wonder, boss, because, Phil Mushnick gave some nice color on that whole Bergman thing, because he heard directly from Bergman, which was something that I think this documentary sort of revealed, is that he's talking to Dave too. Dave says that, sort of passing himself off as a 60 Minutes producer when he's really the brother of a legendary 60 Minutes producer. But
Lowell Bergman?
Who is it? I think so. Lowell Bergman. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Holy shit. I didn't put that together. Wow.
Yep.
That's nuts.
So Phil calls his sister's cousin, who's an entertainment lawyer, and discovers that. So, boss, I got to ask you: you've seen Phil Mushnick's face, right? You've heard him carry on. You've absorbed his essence. Thoughts?
Like, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. You look at him. I mean, he to me, he's an angry New Yorker, and he wants to be angry about something. And he just chose whatever. Let's say, oh, it's fucking wrestling. Let's just do that now. And I'm going to find everything I can to be angry about it.
Oh, he's not angry about a thing in the world.
Oh
he couldn't have been a cooler customer. Here.
Oh my God. The angst inside him. Oh my God. What a
Evan, you want to?
Did he? Yeah, I mean, that's the question. Did he complain about everything else in the world?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. He did have a lot of gripes about wrestling that weren't related to the story. I remember he had a big problem with the DX t-shirts, the Suck It. These kids are running around wearing the Suck It shirts. yeah, that right. I do remember Jim Ross had a good line about Phil Mushnick where he was like, something must have happened in Phil's childhood that made him really dislike pro wrestling to the point where it's almost an obsession, or something like that. Yeah, no, he's not thrilled with any of it, but it is so synonymous with his career, I guess, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, I don't know. I like seeing his face, he's just, I mean, I don't want to, well, fuck it. He just seems pathetic.
Listen. I would say I didn't want to trigger you by that question, boss, but I'd be lying if I said that. So that to me, Josh, was kind of a key theme of the documentary. There's this cat and mouse game, and in some ways you can see Phil Mushnick as the stand-in for Sean O'Shea. We don't hear from Sean O'Shea. We don't get the prosecutor's perspective on this, or any of the investigators assigned to the prosecutor. But in a lot of ways, I think it's fair to say Phil Mushnick was simpatico with what Sean O'Shea was out to accomplish, and no small part of it, considering the bullhorn that the New York Post is in his column in particular. Now, there's that point, Josh, where there's kind of a back and forth with Jerry about chicken or the egg, right? Is the U.S. Attorney's Office already investigating Vince? And thus Phil Mushnick knows this, is hip to this, and can write confidently about we need to investigate Vince because he knows it's going to happen? Or is indeed
he's also just true? He's also just sorry to cut in. He's also the biggest platform at the time, probably, right?
Totally.
That is criticizing the WWE. I mean, now it's on social media, it's, the newsletters that are still around, and, some wrestling sites don't even make a dent compared to what it was like when, Phil Mushnick and the New York Post was writing those articles. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even come close to the circulation and the people that are reading it, right?
Right.
Yeah, every word is obsessed over. Mushnick has something. What has he got today? And everyone gathers around and reads into every word instead of there being this chorus, right, of perspectives that you can kind of sift through and pick from. Josh, what did you make of that whole thing of to me, it's chicken or the egg. I kind of fall on the idea that Mushnick knew the U.S. Attorney's Office was going after Vince, and so called for an investigation, or knew that they were looking there, and so called for an investigation. But the way McDivitt puts it, and Mushnick laughs this off, he says in his column that the U.S. Attorney's Office needs to investigate because it's essentially it's bullshit that Hogan didn't have to testify in Zahorian's trial. Kids are being marketed to in this way, and now we have proof. This can't go on. What do you make of that?
I don't think that was the cause of it. Now, I think I said before, and I noted here when I was watching it again, that the New York districts, especially the ones in relation to New York City, are the most publicity focused of the various U.S. attorneys' offices. As much as we like to think that somehow, from the president on down, there's one set policy. There's central justice in D.C., and then there are 100 or more different districts around the country where there is, U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York who sets most policy. The different New York districts have a culture, and yes, there's turnover. Yes, there's people that come in and change, and every administration, the actual person in charge changes. But the culture of these is very publicity focused, and are driven for that for a variety of different reasons. This actually goes into something I was just thinking about while we're all sitting here. One of the things that really clicked for me was that, there was that exhibit and in the end, in closing, that was shown of the different circles of FDA to different corporations, all the way down to now we're talking about Vince. Vince is an easy target, a much easier target to them than going after AstraZeneca or whoever it was who's marketing steroids or something like that. So it's a high profile district who wants to make a high profile case, and they were going to search out and find somebody. I don't know, maybe somebody did sit on the can reading the New York Post and saw that and said, yeah, let's go after Vince.
Yeah.
Remember, they were already after Zahorian once they went after Dunn, and then they see the picture on the wall. And I can't remember which wrestler it was that said at that particular time, So remember, this would have been early enough because it would have been before news of Zahorian's arrest leaked, that they went to the FedEx, took pictures of everything.
This is Brian Blair who said this.
Brian Blair, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so Brian Blair gets contacted by the FBI before he even knows that Zahorian was arrested. And wrestlers talk, the wrestler grapevine and gossip is like second to none, right?
Right.
So this, the FBI is already on these particular wrestlers, all the people on his list, at least the ones who had pending shipments at the FedEx, before Zahorian even gets formally charged with a crime, and before the fact that he was arrested even leaks. So they've already probably talked to a dozen wrestlers who then they threaten with prosecution. Although I'm not really clear what crime it would be. What, misdemeanor acceptance of steroids? But anyway, they all get lied at least that there's this crime. And then they use that to have them come in and talk about Zahorian. So there's already now, I'm just speculating as to the number, a dozen wrestlers who have admitted getting steroids from Zahorian. And it all goes back to this particular spot in Pennsylvania for the WWF's tapings. So on one level, there's different words that are used within the FBI and DOJ investigations, whether or not someone is a suspect, whether or not someone is a person of interest, whether or not someone is a target of the investigation itself. Vince was probably someone of a person of interest at this particular time, and then he gets moved to target, but he was already on their radar in the sense of someone involved in this from about 10 days into the search warrant executed on Zahorian.
So your point is that, before news hits that this is in process, people are hip. I mean, McDivitt would say that Zahorian kind of knew they were on his trail already. I mean, he heard about the memo, right, that Linda McMahon wrote to Pat Patterson in 1989. George Zahorian was arrested the week of WrestleMania 6 in his office in 1990, in April 1990, or March it was, I think, in Pennsylvania. And that memo came out in 89, and he was freaking out about, why he wouldn't be assigned to the WWF tapings in Pennsylvania coming up, and all of that shit. And the boys need their candy. Jay Strongbow saying that happens around this point in time. And he knew that he was kind of, even the wiretaps that come out in his own trial when he's talking to Bill Dunn, that was, I think, a key moment that turned against him. And folks that listened to the trial of George's life, when we read that transcript, we remember this, where he sort of has to claim that he was ignorant about the fact that the law had changed about the legal reasons to give someone steroids, that it had become much more prescriptive in 1988 as to what you could and couldn't do, treatment of a disease. That was about it. Good, legitimate doctor-patient relationship. Yet then you play the wire and he's calling the government bastards and they're coming after him. And he's fully aware that the mood had changed, or at least the jury was convinced. He was fully aware that the law was changing, the rules of the game were changing. And so that made him look like a big time liar, I thought. But yeah, the idea
him look like a liar, but yet, so the idea that they're not even going and having, they're not even going and going after the wrestlers later after Mushnick's columns, but instead, B. Brian Blair seems to suggest that they very quickly talked to a whole bunch of wrestlers shortly after Zahorian was raided. So they know that it's all about the wrestlers, not just about selling steroids to kids through Dunn.
Yeah.
So, the idea that, okay, we're going to get Dunn, and Dunn's what? I mean, how many jacked up high school football coaches who are bodybuilders are there in this country? About
right, yeah.
He's nobody.
Let's go to the Bell Brothers.
How many crooked doctors are there that are very free with their script pad? A lot of them. How many number one pro wrestling promoters are there in America? Literally, it's a tautology. There's one. So it's a natural progression to go against that particular person for publicizing that steroids are different now, in a way that going after every owner of a Gold's Gym would be, and is also much easier than going after the pharma companies.
Yeah, they clearly wanted none of that smoke as far as McDevitt. I mean, Bagaygi, I remember, what was it? Boss, what's the shirt? Not the Dunder Mifflin shirt. The Rugby Derby.
Rugby Derby, yeah.
These companies, they send their representatives, most of it's at sidebar in Vince's trial, trying to get, subpoenas quashed and trying to not testify about what they didn't do when distributing and selling steroids to doctors all around this country. And, to me, it's like they know it can be established that they knew these doctors were just handing this stuff out for, hardly medical purposes and almost sight unseen without examining patients just so guys could get jacked. And they wanted nothing to do with it. And McDevitt's whole thing, his whole deep dive was that, look, like when you actually study the documents of the FDA's review of things like Anavar, and this came into the documentary big time towards the end and is a key point, they just dropped the ball. I mean, they had internal documents that said Anavar really shouldn't be sold to the public. It should be pulled, and it was never pulled. Like, how, you go after the FDA.
What was it, the Purdue family that just all forfeited up billions of dollars? I don't know.
Yeah, in OxyContin, yeah.
Yeah. So this does happen.
For sure, it does. Evan, we've some questions coming in from the solar system. One here from Matt. How does it feel to know that Vince has definitely watched something you've worked so hard on? He watched this tonight. You got to think. Or maybe he pretended he's not going to watch it.
No, I did not. I would never.
Well, I always go back to what Jim Cornette said on our show that, Vince hasn't watched television or been to a movie or shopped at a grocery store in over 30 years. So I just can't imagine that he would. But I kind of like to think my little, kind of fan fiction on how this all came together is that, Jerry would have had to have phoned Vince, and been like, should I do this, pal? And he said, do it, Jerry. We won, or you can do it in your voice. So that in and of itself, I think, is pretty miraculous, for me. Just, as a guy with action figures on his freaking wall here, wrestling figures,
right.
It is surreal, that I'm sure he's aware of the show. I mean, definitely of this episode, and that's pretty nuts. We never
maybe
knew.
They had a party. Maybe they had a screening party. Maybe at the McMansion there, and
I think they had
David comes over and they're just sitting there watching, drinking, having popcorn, the whole thing.
I think
that would be amazing.
They had the party at the same bar where everyone popped for Vince when the story came on the air that he was indicted.
Or when he took his neck brace off and twirled it around. I mean, that was. I remember
think of that ending, boss.
Oh my God!
You guys
I
didn't
thought
have
that
that
was
on your-
perfect.
You guys didn't have that on your
nothing
show.
wrong with that fucking neck. I don't care what anyone says.
Oh, come on.
No. I think when he told that story, it was almost like that's the ending. It was like it hit me right when he said it. I was like, that's the ending, because we kind of know, most of what the story is or the beats of the story, but it was like, how is this thing going to end? Like he wins, good night, So when he told me that, which I had never heard before, that was his moment of celebration, and it is very Vince, but at the same time, it just was like the perfect ending to the piece, at the same time. But then Jerry was kind of stepping it back a little bit, which we showed a little bit in the episode, because he's like, well, I don't want anyone to think that his neck wasn't hurt, because Vince, definitely had a few cocktails in him, and we're like, no, don't take it off, but it's just a perfect ending for that show.
Yeah.
It was
And
so
Vince,
funny.
Vince would totally do that too. Even if his neck did hurt, he would do it. I would submit.
Well, he was
Just to
taking
get
the
a pop.
doomsday device, in bars, at that time too. So
Sure was. Another question. We'll go around the room. Boss, you first. What quote from this episode stuck with you the most?
Oh God, what quote didn't? But this one, I'm gonna play it. There's one that I got 7 actually that really stuck with me. I'll play one right now that I really enjoyed.
We were kind of celebrating that he got indicted, because now we get a chance to put an end to this thing. After 18 months of getting bled to death in the media and all the accusations, please just give me a chance to go in a courtroom and kick their butt, because that's the only way this is going to end.
I love the idea that they're excited that he's been indicted.
Yeah.
So they can go to court and fucking end the thing.
Easy to say in retrospect, but yes.
Right.
Can I say one thing on that? Because that's an amazing moment too, which didn't really come to life for me when we were doing the interview, but when we started scripting the reenactments for the episode, and it was like really, it didn't hit me the tone of that and how it all until we put it all together, and seeing like a restaurant full of people cheering to that information was just like, well, that's, there is some kind of subtle, comedy in that.
Yeah.
But one of the other moments that kind of feels similar to me, which is very Vince, very, very, very Vince, and something I regret not being able to fit into this edit, but we're going to release it as a deleted scene, so it does exist.
Ooh, here we go. Hot scoop.
Oh, I like that.
Here we go. Hot scoop. There's this moment, I think, where it was, I'm pretty sure it was when Vince was indicted. It was either, I think it was when either he was indicted or the charges came.
He knew they were coming. Yeah, he knew.
Okay,
they were trying to indict him.
Okay, right. And so just one day, he just says to Jerry, he's like, let's go down there and talk to him. Meaning talking to the authorities. And
the U.S.
they
attorney
went down there, the U.S. attorney, and they went down there and they showed up to just talk to them. It's like, well, if and nobody would meet with them. They were all flabbergasted.
What do you think?
They were all
we're talking indictment. All right, I can deal with that.
And Jerry's reaction, I do remember, to Vince pitching that idea or saying that we should do. He's like, "Are you sure?" Like, and he was like, "This is very, illustrative of how kind of singular Vince is, in terms of that." And so he shows up there, and I think that the lead investigator, one of the main investigators, was also like present. And do you remember his name? I can't remember. There's so many characters.
I think he might be referencing Tony Valenti when he says this.
Tony Valenti. That's right. Yep, you're right. Tony Valenti was there, and he was like ducking for cover, and so it was like this whole like just amazing scene of him just like waltzing down straight to the U.S. Attorney's office to be like, well, let's talk,
Yeah, you want to indict?
I call bullshit on that.
Yeah, go.
Yes.
I mean, what? I'm flabbergasted with this.
Let me see if I can bring up the line, but keep going.
There's no way that the investigator would not. You don't have to say anything. If Vince wants to come and start running his mouth, this is insane. If Vince had been there and if he said one thing that was untrue, now they've got him on a lying to investigators charge. And that opens up a whole new period of time in which they can investigate. Because remember, one of these charges was added like one of the last days statute of limitations. There's absolutely no way that investigator did not, that ducked him and didn't talk to him. That's bullshit.
Love it.
I've never lied.
Because
I've never
if
lied.
he goes
I
in
always
there,
tell the truth.
So that's the thing. This is what I tell my clients when about witness tampering. It's like, even if you call from the jail and tell the witness to tell the truth, you know what the prosecutor is going to say that you just did? Witness tampering, because truth is whatever helps you, as opposed to what we think they said. That would allow them to get in so much more information. And Vince would have almost had to have taken the stand then to explain how it is that he wasn't lying to them about what
he would have been on the record or something.
Well, there's no such thing as off the record with the FBI.
Right.
It's not like journalism where there's like, Jack, I don't know as much of it as almost any of it as you do as far as the ethics there. But the FBI does not do off the record for a target of an investigation who's been indicted. That just, unless you're proffering saying that this is what I'll say to testify against somebody else or as part of a plea bargain, that does not exist. Let's go down and talk to the FBI and I'll just tell them what really happened or just answer any questions they have for me. They would have hard-ons that would have popped out of their pants.
Well,
I've got one of those too.
It is quite a leap going from barging into the U.S. Attorney's office, ask me anything you want, to not even testifying in your own defense when the trial actually comes around.
So
ballsy. It was ballsy, Josh.
No, it wasn't.
To not call Vince to the stand.
So there's a dip. So there, in this case, where the thematic narrative of the case is government overreach, and that again, I'll go back to that exhibit we saw in the episode here, saying like who's the small fish they're going after? Government overreach. Is this all they've got? All that sort of thing. How dare they go after a baseball, apple pie, pro wrestling, and the American dream of someone that grew up in a trailer park? That narrative is compelling. It's a story. It's something that people can believe. And it firmly puts this into perspective of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Once you start having two sides start telling their story, and once you have competing stories, it's very hard for the human mind, especially an untrained lay juror, to not just start weighing it 50-50, preponderance of the evidence, civil law style, which is not helpful. He's pulling the wool over your eyes a little bit as far as saying that it's ballsy not to call witnesses, that that's the most uncommon thing ever to happen in a criminal trial. It's not.
It's uncommon for it to succeed in federal court, though.
Can I retract something?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so when I said he was ducking him, no, he actually said that he was shell-shocked and had no idea what to do, Valenti, when Vince McMahon showed up. And then he says that they were so cowardly they wouldn't meet with us, and they wouldn't talk to us. And then I remember asking McDivitt if, does that kind of speak to Vince's boldness, because he is a bold character. And he's like, well, you're exposing yourself legally, if you do that, and if you've done something wrong, that's not going to be good. But McDivitt said if he was confident enough that he wasn't worried about it. So and then he says, I wasn't worried about it either, to be honest with you. So that was the recollection of it, or that was really what the whole sentiment was.
Well, I stopped going around the horn. Evan, standout quote for you. I mean, this episode front and back now, but
well, it was a quote that, man, there's a lot. Probably when that Ronald Reagan got the wrong attorney. Probably
that's it. That's mine too.
Yeah. Sorry, play it. You want to play it?
Which one?
I will represent WWE.
Is that it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's when he's talking about bringing in.
I'll find it. I'll find it before.
Yeah.
I have it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's just that. I mean, that actually that line used to end the act. It used to end and cut right to commercial, and I liked it better the way it played like that. But we just had to.
I got it.
Okay, here you go. Go ahead.
A person in the media called me up and said Ronald Reagan had to testify in Oliver North's case despite his not wanting to testify. How did Hulk Hogan get out of testifying? And I remember my answer was, well, maybe Reagan had the wrong lawyer.
Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. Jerry stands there while, basically he is the cockroach that survives the nuclear holocaust. I've said this. Yes. And he'll stand there nonplussed, just kind of frumpy, and just be like, so what? Like what? Everyone's dead. What's your point? Tremendous shit, pal. Period.
But he had a better argument for Hulk Hogan than Reagan did in Oliver North. Because this is for Zahorian, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. As he says, he first goes with the actual rational argument that he made to the judge. I can show you all this proof that Hulk Hogan actually did have a doctor-patient relationship, right, and that his testimony is one of marginal relevance, if at all relevant to this case, and two, given the marginal relevance to this case, given the extensive evidence against Zahorian for the other counts on this case, given the fact that, from what I understand, they weren't even charging him with distributing to Hogan. It would just be 404B, other bad act evidence that they would be trying to introduce through Hogan. The fact that he has proven that he had an actual doctor-patient relationship that was different than most of these other cases means that it's not worth for this duplicative, marginally relevant testimony against his rights. This is way pre-HIPAA, but still his medical right to privacy. That's a real argument. Notice that Hogan had to testify in this case, right?
He sure did. Yeah.
Jerry wasn't able to get him to not testify here.
No, he wasn't. But here is Vince charged with distributing steroids to him, as opposed to, I guess Zahorian. Yeah, Zahorian was accused in much the same way of distributing, I guess you could say, to him. It was more of though with Zahorian, it was more the argument of whether he was violating, the laws that bind doctors, as opposed to, that those laws don't apply to Vince McMahon. And so I felt like that kind of opened up.
Did they actually charge him with a count in relation to Hogan?
did they charge Hulk Hogan? Yes, they did. Yeah, remember he was Hulk Doe. We had the Doe Rules T-shirt and everything. He was one of the 5 John Does.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the one that got excused. But yeah, that was wild. I mean, Evan, what do you make of that? It was interesting. I mean, basically, you had McDevitt saying, basically, I got Hogan out of testifying. It had something to do with him and his wife having children, knowing that Zahorian's a urologist, right? Maybe he just argued that, Your Honor, it's not going to do. It's going to do my client more damage to go up there and say that he can't conceive children, which we know is
right.
I'm extrapolating here to be clear, but we know it's a side effect of heavy steroid use versus the benefit it would have to the prosecution. Because Bill Dunn is enough to put George Zahorian in jail. I mean, that's really the evidence the whole case turned on. I think the wrestlers did provide important testimony that it established what was actually in the packages, so that they couldn't try to say, well, how do you know that all these FedEx records were steroids being shipped? Well, 4 of the guys came up here and said it was. But that aside, that's kind of new information to me that, it had something to do with, Hulk and Linda as to how we got Hogan out of testifying in Zahorian's case.
Yeah, well, I think, at least for the episode, I think it was key to understand because you hear, John Arezzi talk about, why did Hogan get out of testifying? The other wrestlers have to testify and things like that. And I think the point is that, well, first off, Jerry agrees that they had enough evidence, to convict Dr. Zahorian and the reasons that you mentioned. But I think what makes it unique was the idea that Hogan did have that sort of relationship, or that's what he established, that he had that relationship with Zahorian, that doctor-patient confidentiality. And I think that's, ultimately what got him out of it, which I think was for legitimate reasons, but I had never heard before. I had never heard anywhere before that specific detail on the reason that he had gotten him out of for testifying.
Yep. And the argument being that you're charging this guy Zahorian with willy-nilly giving people steroids without even treating them or even knowing them or sending them in the mail without even seeing them. But here you have a guy who actually went to the doctor for this fertility potential issue, right? Or some kind of personal medical issue that, even though it might be related to steroids, is kind of different. Now, reading the Zahorian transcript, it seemed to me that Roddy Piper could have turned around and made the same case. If memory serves, the details are a little fuzzy in my mind at the moment, but Piper did talk about non-steroid related medical conditions that he went to Zahorian about, but he didn't consider him his doctor. He just wasn't. But if he said that Zahorian was his doctor, maybe that would have made the difference. And Hogan, in his testimony, in Vince's trial, talked about a range of doctors he got steroids from, which I think, of course, that's 3 years later than Zahorian's trial, but still kind of contradicts the idea that Zahorian was really his doctor when he had all these other guys he went to. And
the thing is, bro, the other doctors were Terry Bollea's doctors, dude.
Yeah, no.
Oh, is that the distinction, Terry?
Yeah, dude. What?
Yeah, dude.
So, Josh, standout quote?
I think the one that came to me was really that most ballsy comment. That was what just seemed kind of silly to me. I get why he said it, especially for the non-legal audience. But I would say even in in serious felony cases that I've won, I've still not put on witnesses 50% of the time.
Yeah. To your point, I mean, that's just you're now inviting the jury to decide who's lying instead of whether the government met their burden, which is much more of a weighted responsibility on the government. And I think, if Zahorian didn't testify in this case, I do wonder, because when I think about the things that really hooked him, it's when he's caught kind of in that half truth about the degree to which he knew the law had changed and how the wiretap contradicted that. I do wonder if Zahorian hadn't taken the stand, if they would have got him. Probably, but I don't know. Wadler's testimony carried a lot more weight in Zahorian's trial than it did in Vince's, because McDevitt just completely excoriated Wadler to the point that he could never be an expert witness again on this subject matter. I mean, he may have been, but that's kind of the way it's framed.
I have a question for Evan. I was wondering, did you guys reach out to any of Judge Mishler's family at all?
No,
no,
no.
Because I was curious if you guys could confirm that his favorite sandwich was a Reuben.
I knew you'd ask that. No, but one just Mishler anecdote that I do remember that was in the cut at one point in time was Jerry kind of ribbing the judge on, the fact that he would fall asleep, periodically throughout the trial. And he
would
was totally
oscillate between lucidity and senility at any given moment.
right. And he there was, he depicted it as where he was falling asleep and he'd wake up being objection sustained, or whatever.
Oh and McDevitt says, Your Honor, there was no objection.
Right.
Exactly. What are you talking about? But he was in, because I wondered about this. Evan, sorry to cut you off, but you sparked this thought. When we're reading the transcript, boss, and it's like, Jesus, McDevitt is just going on and on and on, and he's so circuitous in what he's saying. I wonder if part of it is like the judge isn't listening right now. So like, who's going to stop me? He's out cold.
The only thing that's what stops you is the other party objecting. Nothing is actually So nothing is inadmissible until the other party objects.
Yeah, and O'Shea sat there he had nowhere near the objections that McDevitt did.
Oh, I know.
Yes, so a judge does have an independent duty if the judge wants to go ahead and cut things off. But this is a federal trial with an experienced federal prosecutor on the other side. And this is an experienced judge who's not going to come in and do that with a bunch of experienced advocates in front of him. He could go ahead and be asleep. I don't even remember any of that stuff about him saying just objection sustained out of nowhere in that trial transcript that you guys read. On top of that, it is O'Shea's duty to object. So the judge has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Got this in from a listener. Maybe a silly question, but what the hell? Listening to the trial of his life and watching the episode today, I feel that if the U.S. District Attorney did a better job of understanding the industry and went for a larger case instead of trying to shoehorn something in Nassau County, they probably would have gotten Vince. I guess what I'm asking is, was the McDevitt defense so strong, or was this just a case of the prosecution being unaware of the cast of characters they were dealing with and the case just not being strong enough because the prosecution was too light?
It's the wrong venue. This goes back like which U.S. Attorney's Office wants to handle this case. Indicting in multiple areas and being very unclear as far as what the conspiracy was until the last possible moment. This case should have been held, as Mushnick says, either in Connecticut or in Pennsylvania, or if you want to go after the Hogan Vince connection, in Florida, or it should have been in one of the other districts in New York City area. This is just not the right one, but this was the particular one where this particular U.S. attorney for this particular district decided to do this.
That's really what it is. Yeah, I mean, you can say it should have been in Stamford, but the U.S. attorney for Stamford didn't want to prosecute Vince. Clearly, the U.S. attorney for Pennsylvania, the Middle District, that put George Zahorian in jail, clearly did not want to extend this case beyond George Zahorian and try to indict somebody else for that behavior.
Didn't he go on the record with like newspapers or something else saying that?
There was pretty clear. I remember it being established during the series. I forget what the exact piece of supporting documentation is, but Josh, you're right. There was pretty much a statement from James West, who was the U.S. attorney for that part of Pennsylvania, saying that, we don't think that we can take this case any further. Like, we're not interested in actually going after the WWF. And it turned out Zachary Carter, who is the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District, and Sean O'Shea were more than ready to pick up that ball. The listener also writes, also my grandfather is named Marty Bergman, but since he didn't take these guys to the track, I don't think it's him. Good to know. Another listener, after seeing this episode of Darkside of the Ring, it's clear to see Stephanie McMahon was justified in her comments comparing the judicial process of the steroid trial to the terrorist attacks of 9/11.
That's right.
And
I agree.
It's safe to say everyone at the Labs fan owes her an apology, boss. You agree?
Yeah, no.
And that was something, right, Evan, to see Jerry go into some tears describing counseling a young Stephanie who she's all broken up over what Sean O'Shea just said about her dad in the closing. Yeah,
I another thing I did not anticipate, with the interview, that it was going to go into emotional territory there.
Wow.
When we did that, and that was something I definitely, that was a big takeaway after. It was like, wow, and yeah. One of the things I didn't really know. I didn't know that aspect of the story that she had run. I think you guys had, later on I'd heard, with your podcast you talked about, I think, her running out and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, but like hearing him talk about it and then being able to create a scene out of it, I think is a nice moment.
for sure.
I gotta say too, the guy that you guys hired to be the Vince McMahon reenactment guy,
so
he's
lucky,
just awesome.
Yeah, that was lucky because we've definitely had some hit or miss Vinces over the years. But this guy was last minute. It was a last minute casting, and we were
really
It usually is that way, and we really had to nail it for this episode because obviously most of the shots would be of Vince, and the hardest thing to find with casting of Vince is the hair. Super hard to find. Super hard to find the hair.
Yep.
And you really can't mimic it in any other way. And this guy had the hair, and we were like, damn, he had like the hairline exactly from the time period. And we were just like,
that's what really does it. It's the hair, the hair, and just the
brow,
profile, facial structure just worked great.
That's all we do.
Where'd you find him? Where do you guys film that stuff?
So we film all the reenactments in Toronto.
Okay.
We film them. We film them up there. We have a studio, and we basically have about 3 weeks to cast everybody for 3 to 4 episodes we shoot at a time. And it's pure madness because it's really hard to find people, especially the wrestlers. It's really hard to find people with those silhouettes, to match or to be convincing. But we bring people in, we photograph them in low light or backlit with a silhouette, just because that's all we're trying to sell is just the shape, and this guy, his name is escaping me right now, but he was terrific, just really perfect.
You guys do a great job with that, like, with the reenactment. Years ago I did a reenactment show for whatever, I don't remember what the hell the name of the show was, but it was so bad. It was like they shot it in an office building, and I played the victim, and like they just put like these black curtains around the office building, like to create a bar scene. It was awful, but I love the way you guys do it with the dark lighting, the soft focus, the whole thing. It's such a I love it. Creates instead of looking phony, it creates a very dreamy atmosphere, which is so cool.
Yeah, we just really felt like, we talked about it last time I was on the show, but like, Errol Morris and Thin Blue Line is really what we borrowed heavily from, because we just figured if we made it stylized, because most reenactments you see are trying to be capture reality and it fails so miserably, and that was the last thing we wanted. So we figured that if we just made it less real purposefully and made it more feel like kind of a faded memory or a dream,
right,
and really just leaned into that as much as possible, it would sort of like take the gun out of the audience's hands in terms of, well, that's not what a person looks like, and that's not what it would have been like, and that car wouldn't have been there,
right.
And then it also lets the audience to kind of fill in the blanks, which I always think is a better approach to filmmaking in general, is where you can let the audience's imagination really trigger, and so that's what, and obviously it made it more achievable to do rather than going to locations, and because the whole thing is just, it's pure madness. When we shoot those things, it's literally like, it's just going from, all right, we just shot this one scene and like the Chris Benoit episode, now we got to change it all over to the Brawl for All, and it's nuts.
How many, like on average, how many takes per shot?
It's very fast. Everything is shot in slow motion, as you see, and it's all Steadicam. Every shot is on a Steadicam. So and basically what we do is, because it's slow motion, you're only capturing a fraction of a second. So you have to make sure that one little fraction of a second is the shot where the light hits exactly.
Right.
So you're just doing it many times and just hoping you get it, or you just want to get that little moment. And it's really hard for actors too, because the actors have to actually perform faster than they normally would.
Right.
So for any sort of dramatic sequence or any fight sequence or anything, they actually have to perform it like at ×2 speed, really, sometimes, to really make sure it captures in that half of a second. But I think this season the most fun we had was the FMW episode using the explosions were awesome, and the Johnny Canine episode when we were blowing up the police station and the strip club and everything. That was a blast.
So awesome.
With the Christmas tree and the
Christmas
police station.
Tree,
great touch.
Which was really cool, because just to comment on the Christmas tree, I know we're getting off the rails but our editor who cut the his name is Rob Highland. He cut that episode, and he noticed that everything bad that happened with Johnny K-9 and the Law occurred around Christmas time. He just figured that out on his own. And he's like, so, and then that inspired all of us to be like, well, we're gonna decorate this whole episode in Christmas stuff. That's and awesome. It worked perfectly for the police station bombing, because then you had the tree and everything. So just little things like that, where everyone's contributing to this, endeavor here to make this as interesting and
like
creative
your
as
own
possible.
Little Shane Black episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can see how a lifelong wrestling fan like yourself would be expert in figuring out how to make something look somewhat less real. Right, somewhat less real.
Yeah, right, exactly.
A question from the listener: what about the mouthing not guilty? What about mouthing not guilty in the courtroom to the jury? Yes, this was something we talked about, Evan.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's this legend, this folklore about the trial where Afa's in the crowd, in the galley, if you will, and word
didn't it happen it was in the transcripts.
Well, what's in the transcripts actually kind of snuffs it out. I don't know if you remember this, Josh, but it was kind of like a deal where word gets to the judge that apparently somebody saw someone mouth not guilty to one of the jurors, and Mishler takes a nap, and then when he's done, he addresses this, and he calls to sidebar a wrestling fan named Dory DeQuattro, who was in the crowd, who admitted to being the person that said he saw this happen, and then got all nervous and angsty about his name being on the record, and kind of didn't want to really stand behind this allegation. And then the judge turns to
kicked out back.
Well, maybe. And they turn to the jurors, who supposedly were the recipients of this kind of like veiled threat, you could say. And the jurors like, I didn't see that. No, like, I don't know what you're talking about. So
I wouldn't even call that a threat.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was going a bit far, but
yeah, like
intimidate, do the right thing, kind of,
Well, so like they're different courts have different views on like what spectators are allowed to like do. Like obviously you're not really supposed to talk or mouth things, but then there gets to like heck, there are cases when bikers against child abuse come to like a child abuse case, and they're all sitting in all their regalia, or like the family of a victim of a murder is all there with like shirts that say like "Justice for Brandon" or whatever.
Mm.
Some courts let that, some courts don't. But I mean, Mishler asked them, and all the jury like, "No, we didn't see that. We were paying attention to the trial."
Right.
It's a tempest in a teapot, other than just being funny if the wrestler actually did it.
Yeah, when you hear that story, you feel like it was something that was so apparent to everybody in the courtroom that it was acknowledged from the bench, that somehow like it was substantiated. And it just seemed to be something that this guy, because when he talks to Mishler about it, the guy in the audience, it's not in sort of open court. It's not that everyone can hear it. It is at sidebar. It is kind of a hushed situation. And so it just seems like something this guy perpetuated. Like, I saw this happened, I swear. And then word gets to the judge, or the word gets to the prosecution, that someone in this galley thinks that happened. And I don't know if the juror didn't hear it. I don't really know how it's material, even if he did try it.
Right. So I remember the court could kick Afa out of there if he finds
for sure
misconduct, but short of like actually proving it to the point that the court believes it happens. To quote from The Wire, this is an open court and a free nation of laws. Everybody's allowed to sit in that jury as long as they behave themselves. So like,
I don't like that show.
Make literally a federal case out of it to even determine whether or not he could do anything.
Yeah, it would take a lot of work just to get to the bottom of that. Evan, you were going to say something there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, with that detail, one of the more infamous, as you said, kind of legends, folklore of the trial. And there were a lot of those little details that we picked up along the way. I mean, I think Dave Meltzer was the one that retold that story to us about Afa and the not guilty thing. And there were a few other things. And of course, I remember when I listened to your guys' podcast about the jury selection, there was all those great moments with the, fans, trying to get out of the jury duty, saying that wrestling is fake and so on and so forth. And so, like, for us, it was like that was an area of interest at one point for us, was to really kind of dig into the wrestling angles spilling out into into a courtroom. And here's, because our show deals with those blurred lines aspects, right, of like real life versus, the kind of the scripted side of wrestling. And that was something we were going to play with more in this episode originally. Then when it came time to really like hunker down and get like, okay, now we got to really tell a story based upon not just conjecture and things like this and some of those funnier details, more like, okay, we got to make sure we get the essence of the story. And then as we found, there was no room for anything else, you know?
Yeah, that's right. You have to lay so much groundwork.
It's just it's so funny. It was such an eye-opening thing when we were reading those, and then like it is you know, when you talk about the grand scheme of things, it's a shame that it's not important, you know. But it is just
funny. And it's like no, it is, and it was something I remember. Jason was like really wanted the director of the show wanted that in there at one point too, and it's like, well, what else are we going to get rid of? Because you know we're pretty packed at this point.
Should have negotiated a 2-hour season finale. What's wrong with you?
Sore spot.
Very sore spot, sir. So Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah, right. He'll give it right back to you, boss.
I'm just trying to trigger you now.
Do you
I muted you.
Jason wanted to put the Offa thing in there. Evan, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. There was at one point where he was interested more in those aspects of the story, where I was really focused on the just getting the I guess for lack of a better term, the facts, the bullet points, here's the A to Z on this story versus the side quests. And there's so many of them. I mean, you guys did 4,700 hours on this subject. So
right. It's clear how long it would take. I mean, you can't act like you don't know how long it would take to explore them all. But I think, the key curiosity to the general person, I think, about this whole thing and the general wrestling fan is, how did Vince walk? Like, really, how does Vince end up in this total whirlwind of just the most nightmarish publicity and literally getting indicted? And it's like it never happened. It's like he suffered no ill consequence whatsoever from this. And you would think he'd be walking into a lion's den as like this carny pro wrestling promoter facing the music in a federal courthouse. And so it's like, if you're going to tell the story of how Vince walked on this thing, you got it.
Entrepreneur.
It's going to be the legal cat and mouse game. And further, you had Jerry, and Jerry's going to, that's his bias. Yeah. He's going to talk about those details because he knows that those are the moments that saved Vince's ass. The side distractions don't have anything to do with driving home the points of law that he felt.
It's not the story that we wound up telling. Yeah, right.
So we'll go home with this, folks. And Josh, I'd like to start with you. The question is, does Vince get acquitted if the same trial is held today and the wrestler deaths could be used as evidence? Folks that have used steroids. I have an answer, but my personal thought, but Josh, I'd like to hear your thoughts first so that I can not say something that may have sounded stupid and pretend that I wasn't going to say it.
So we're assuming that we're saying that all the same evidence is there, but the only thing that's different is that a bunch of people have died of steroids.
Yeah.
Why would that be admissible?
I don't know. I mean, you had Billy Graham walking up on the stand in George Zahorian's trial, selling that he has no hip left and barely able to walk, and all these histrionics.
Well, he was never hip to begin with, so I don't know what he's complaining about.
But so one of the other wrestlers, wasn't he dying, and they had to like do it by like video? Or
that was John Studd. He was in his deathbed. He had to phone in.
But they kept that in the jury that he was sick, right? If I remember correctly.
No,
Yeah, they weren't allowed to talk about him having cancer.
Is that what it was?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why they would be allowed to bring that in.
Interesting.
Like the public might know about it, and maybe the prosecutor would try to get that in.
Yeah, because I think the question more, Josh, is like, does it change the nature of the charge? Does it present new options if you can say not only did Vince oversee an empire where he looked the other way while his guys did steroids, if not saw to it that certain guys got what they needed, but that some even ended up dying, if that changes the menu of options available to prosecutors. Because to me, it's like, if it's still a distribution case, so it sounds callous to say, but it doesn't matter if people die. It matters if Vince distributed. That's still the only thing that matters.
Right. So this is hard to answer because, then we're assuming that Chris Benoit hasn't happened, but just people have died.
I guess he's saying that there's been deaths that have been, I think Eddie Guerrero's death is one that's pretty clearly attributable to steroids.
Sure. Right. So let's say that this case happened. So somehow we're moving forward all the acts that happened to like right after Eddie's death, but not Benoit's death or something like that. I'm trying to figure
right
different in sentiment potentially. But what we've also, so the early 90s and steroids was, yes, this big push to say that steroids are bad. But then, I don't know, what's the zeitgeist now about the use of steroids? Like, I mean,
I think it's died down quite a bit. I don't think people are anywhere near as anti-steroids as they were 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
so it's hard for me to answer that question then.
Yeah, because it's about time and place. Yeah, you have to set the time. Yeah,
because this is not going to be a central issue to the case as long as they don't charge like a controlled substances homicide, which is extremely rare, even if it shouldn't be. That's for people to talk about separately.
Yeah,
that does not get charged much, if at all. And now we're so much more passé about drugs in general, even more so about steroids than we are about drugs of abuse. It's just one of those, like, I don't know, why is it illegal just like marijuana? Why is that illegal? I don't mean to sound insulting, but I'm not sure if it's an intelligible question capable of answer.
Yep. I take your point for sure. It may have heightened passions, around the trial, and it might have like shaded the coverage of, like, not just he's overseeing these cartoonish physiques, but the people are dropping dead. That's always been kind of the next step. And that's what Wadler's up there to do, is kind of like go through the menu of things that have ever been attributable, negative health outcomes that have ever been attributable to steroid use. And that's something.
But if the charges are the same, right? Like, I don't know, does that really bear on the charges?
That's what
not
I'm
on
saying.
not on distribution.
I don't know if they would even allow, depending on the judge might not even allow the fact that people have died from this to come in. Now, McDevitt might open himself. McDevitt would probably have changed how hard he went after the expert, because McDevitt going after the expert, I realized, was really about doing why aren't they going after the pharma companies aspect of this. So maybe hard against the expert, and then that would have definitely made sure they don't go after. The judge doesn't allow in the fact that people have died, or allow the people that the people died. McDevitt would be hammering even harder and harder and harder than why are these drugs allowed to be made at all?
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, totally. But also the testimony would be slightly different. Say if more of these wrestlers' peers had passed away, perhaps, in terms of, whether or not, maybe it's total speculation on if they were pressured to take them or felt like they had to, and then knowing that, some of their colleagues had passed away, I might have changed some of the testimony a little bit.
Yeah, they might try to sneak sneak is the wrong word, but I'm sure there have been objections all over the place if they started going down that road, but something may have been introduced, like, my buddy died, and, oh, gee, now we're talking life and death, if that gets out in a testimony. Well, Evan, let's close with this here. I've been fascinated to hear you share some cuts, some cutting room floor things that you wish would have gotten in there. Are we missing anything else that's going to stick in your craw? Like, man, we had such good stuff, but we only had 45 minutes.
Oh man, definitely the one with him going to the U.S. Attorney's office is one, for sure. I'm trying to think. Do you remember any that we talked about before? I got 14 of these episodes swimming around my.
No, I totally understand. The one that always fascinated me, and this is from Mushnick's side. Okay, he's saying, because they sued Phil Mushnick for defamation and libel.
Oh, this one, right. Mm-hmm.
The Titan Sports sued Mushnick for his columns, and that's in process. Civil suit. That's in process during all of this grand jury procedures against Vince, subpoena of witnesses against Vince, post Sahorian conviction, and suddenly they stop, and they settle the lawsuit against Mushnick. And Mushnick presents kind of an option of how to think about that. To his thinking, the idea there is that eventually, if that lawsuit were to proceed, Mushnick's side would have been within their rights to depose Vince McMahon, to have McMahon sit down and swear to just all kinds of stuff. I mean, geez, these columns that are at issue that Phil Mushnick wrote are all about the meat of the case that Sean O'Shea would bring. So you would have Vince sworn statements up and down, left and right, ahead of the trial, just like McDivitt had sworn statements from the limo driver, Jim Stewart, ahead of the trial that could disqualify him apparently from even being considered a worthy witness in the eyes of the government. And if you had Vince talking and chirping all day as part of the civil suit about all this steroid stuff, under questioning from Mushnick's lawyer, that kind of defeats the whole ace in the hole, right, Josh, of maybe we don't have to have Vince testify, because at that point, it doesn't matter if Vince testifies or not. He's already given sworn statements about this thing.
I've never distributed illegal steroids.
You only distributed legal steroids legally
That's
because, yes, any statement that he otherwise makes anywhere, especially if it's under oath, is admissible as a statement of a party opponent. Additionally, unlike criminal cases where, while the government has wide authority, if they have probable cause of crime, to try to get a warrant to get evidence, in a civil suit, especially when the defense to a defamation claim is actual truth, civil discovery does not have the same probable cause requirement that a government warrant does. Everything about any distribution anywhere and anything that could lead to evidence about distribution anywhere would be discoverable.
And indeed, we may have heard more from Vince. I think something tells me, Evan, we're going to hear from Vince when they come out with their in-house version on Netflix or whatever they're going to do.
I can't wait. I'm totally fast. That caught me off guard. Just like I remember it was like the same feeling when we found out that they had an Ultimate Warrior doc too. It was like, whoa. And so I think that'll be really interesting to see. I think this is a good primer for whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, the gauntlet's been thrown down, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that'll be really fascinating. One other little deleted scene that I just remembered while we were on the subject was it didn't really bear much on this story, but it really captured that sort of what was happening at the time. And going back to what I was saying earlier in the program about just like the wrestling newsletter writers having to kind of become more of the de facto kind of journalists covering this. There was a scene, and we shot a reenactment for this too, where Vince invited all the journalists into Titan Towers and gave them the tour of Titan Towers, and John Arezzi was there, Wade Keller was there, everybody is there, and they kind of he starts to give a speech to them saying, kind of, if we all work together, then the business is great. If it's good for you, it's good for me. And that's probably off the. Traditionally in wrestling, magazines, when things were probably a little bit more in storyline, and these guys are way outside of that now by this point. And it's just it was a really interesting scene because it was kind of like shades of Trump, sort of demanding loyalty from, the FBI in some ways. I know that's a very dramatic comparison, but, when he's there, in Titan Towers. And he's telling, everyone to work together. And then, Wade Keller's there standing up saying, Vince, if the wrestling business thrives off of what we write, great. If it doesn't, then we're doing our jobs, Vince. And he's like, whatever, 19 or whatever, and so it was a really kind of amazing sequence that kind of painted the portrait of what was really happening at the time, when the kind of wrestling media, if you will, was kind of really branching off and becoming something different, especially with John Arezzi's show, because you would have like wrestlers on there coming on the show talking about their storylines and their feuds and their matches, but then at the other side of the hour, you were really getting into very serious and heavy scandals that were happening in wrestling. And I always found that fascinating of when that really branched off and just switched, into a different gear. And I think this is one of those stories that really led that charge.
It certainly was. This was the story where like the fault lines were drawn. You think of the Russo-Arezzi split around this whole thing. Russo kind of cut in the direction of let's not destroy WWF's business, ends up working for them. And Arezzi says, no, let's keep, having Graham on and Dr. D and other people that Barrio. They're just going to go off on Vince in this feeding frenzy. And it's, you picked your side then, and it's probably been the same demarcation lines ever since till today. Well, boss, I'll leave it to you. Wrapped up thoughts, Dark Side of the Ring. The Steroid Trials is now in the books. The loop has been closed.
I mean, it's amazing. I feel like we've been on this 2-year journey, and to have it come to a close like this. I mean, a phenomenal episode, entertaining, informative, and again, you get to see Jerry McDevitt just be a fucking beast. A beast of a man.
Josh, you have no idea what I'm going to do to you. I mean, I am going to crush you like a bug.
You look forward to coming up against a McDevitt at some point, Josh?
Unfortunately, given that we're on the opposite sides of the country and we're both in the fence business, I don't see that.
I don't mean him.
But I would love to talk to him for 5 hours.
Yeah. Well, Evan, you had the privilege. Great stuff. Thanks for bringing this to life, man.
Oh, thank you guys. I mean, honestly, I don't know if this episode really would have been any. I mean, I know without Jack's help on the episode, but I don't know if we would have pursued McDevitt. I don't know if that would have happened without, you know, the endless hours of entertainment you guys provided on this subject. So without that, you know, who knows? We may never have done it.
Well, it all worked out. And I hope you enjoyed the episode out there in the solar system. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you around the way. It's the trial of his life.
Preceding announcement is a TJ DeSantis production. Its content is intended for private use only.